Good morning. Senate Agriculture is meeting this morning. It is May 28th. We're switched rooms. There seems to be some little small meeting going on in Senate Education. So we thought we'd come to institutions. We're going to talk today about our miscellaneous ag bill. We've got some amendments that are coming forward. We've actually the miscellaneous bills made it through finance, maybe even a trip through appropriations. And we have some language coming across some other bills that have been asked to attach to our miscellaneous bill, which I think that we can be in favor of. We have with us today Chair Watson from Senate Natural Resources. And good morning. The floor is yours.
Good morning. Thank you so much for having me. Well, I'm so grateful to you all for looking at this and considering it. So there are many pages here, but I will tell you this really does three things. So you may recall that last biennium we passed this household hazardous waste extended producer responsibility organization. You're familiar with that as a concept, right? Particularly from pesticides, which is sort of my connection here. So that household hazardous waste EPR was going to be, or is about to be stood up, but particularly because it's new, it needs a longer rollout. So instead of just standing it up fully formed right away, this stages the implementation of that. So it starts with just a registration that's relatively simple, and then it transitions to a 3-year plan. So the 3-year plan again is an initial plan. It's just an introductory plan as people figure out who's in the universe of products that will be covered, and getting them to work together, which will be relatively new. And then it transitions to a more traditional plan after the 3 years, and all of that throughout that has all of the kinds of standards that you would expect for an EPR, including free and convenient collection, public education, performance goals, etc. So that's, and there's a fair bit of language in here about that, but a lot of it actually is just conforming language. So the bulk of it is what I have described to you. I'm happy to get into more details if there's questions about that.
We're going to have council run down through it after.
Yes,
so
great.
Whatever you want to do as far as how you want to describe it's fine with us.
Sure. Well, that's sort of the high level. The second thing is that there is an addition to, or I guess a change to that household hazardous waste program about paint. So there is already an existing extended producer responsibility organization for paint, for architectural paint. And so there are other paint related products that we would say that are things like paint thinners or aerosols, etc., that have that would be covered by the hazardous waste program. But the paint industry is more interested in keeping all of their products together. And so transitioning, so some of the language that's in here transitions paint related products out of household hazardous waste and into the paint extended producer responsibility organization, so that it's not just architectural paint anymore. It covers all of these paint related coating products. And I think that made sense to me in terms of ease for the consumer to know what to do with them. And I think it's also important to note that the paint industry has agreed about this language. They came to a consensus with the Agency of Natural Resources about how to make that happen, and so that is reflected here. So that's thing number 2. And thing number 3 that's in here is about Rygate. So Rygate is, again, the connection here is it's important to the wood products industry, to loggers, etc. And the thing that we're coming up with Rygate is that they have some deadlines that they need to meet, and they've has various plans as to what to do technologically, and their plan has changed. And they're also, so in trying to implement their plan, they ran into tariffs. And so that has forced them to change their plan. And so they are looking for, they do have a solid, what I would describe as a solid plan at this point, to dry their, use the excess heat to dry the wood chips and then use those back in the combustion. So I think like the physics word for that is you're cannibalizing some of the energy. But all of that is to say they need a little bit more time. And I realize that for some folks, this may be a little bit of deja vu, because this is a kind of has been a somewhat perennial ask, but they have new owners at this point. And I have faith that this relatively conservative plan for what to do with the excess heat, I think is a good one. So I want to give them space to do that. And so by pushing back the dates, there's a critical date in October that they need to have pushed back, which is sort of where this started. But then in looking further at this, if we push back that date, there's a whole cascade of dates that need to be pushed back. And so those are all in here as well. That's a lot. But there it is.
Well, I think most of what it is, just looking at the bill in itself, I mean, you've got a lot of pages as far as technical stuff
Yeah.
on the paint products. I think that paint, I'll certainly want the committee if they've got any comments on it. But it looks like the paint is a lot of what we're doing with the pesticides, as you had mentioned at your opening. And it seems to be in conformance. I mean, one of the things that I asked when we first did the pesticides things, when I had all the groups at the table, it's like, well, who's swinging at this? Because nobody's swinging at it. So it doesn't look like anybody's swinging at this neither. It looks like everybody's working together and wanting to get it done.
Yeah.
So, and the Rygate thing makes sense. I do have some history with that as far as being somebody who's been involved with it from the start. And of all things, I think they're making progress. The biggest thing that they had there was an owner who, to be quite frank, nobody could trust. And I think with this new group, it seems to be that they've already quickly established great trust and I think made great progress. So as far as I'm concerned, I would be very favorable to this amendment as a whole.
Thank you so much.
Senator Engel gave us kind of an overview in the office that with Rygate that the time frame is they're asking for about a year. Is that your understanding?
Yes. Yeah. But
Did you have any concern with that, Chair?
I do not have concern with that. That it was also language that they felt comfortable with, and so one of the things that we talked about was that we, particularly with pushing out multiple dates, was that we are going to be hopeful that things go well, and we may need to see them back next year anyway about a rate change, but that'll be a separate issue, and hopefully all of it goes well, and we after that we don't want to see them for a while.
Well, I think even off the record as far as with them, not in the here obviously, because we're on record. But I think they even want to do more.
Sure.
I mean, I think they even have broader plans to be better partners. So, which is I haven't seen any pushback on them at all. I've seen them say, "Oh no, this is what we want to do," but hey, I think we can do even better, which is very nice to hear.
Yeah. Well, let's set them up to walk and then run.
Okay.
Yeah.
Everybody good? Yep. Okay.
Thank you very much.
Next, we're going to have Council O'Grady, and welcome, sir. Thank you for this morning, and thank you to everyone for short notice, even the committee as well. We appreciate that, and our esteemed assistant Linda, who's covering 8 committees today. Council, we have about 30 minutes or thereabouts, and whatever you want us to know. The floor is yours, sir.
Well, first, there are 2 amendments. There's one that's on the calendar today from Senate Finance, and then there's the proposal that you just heard Senator Watson summarizing. It was a very good summary. Which would you like to start with?
Whatever you want to do, Council.
Okay.
The floor is yours.
I'll start with Senator Watson's amendment since that's fresh on your minds. As she just noted, there are three major components. The first 19 pages of this amendment relate to the covered household hazardous products program. Pages 19 to 37 relate to the paid extended producer responsibility program. And pages 37 to 40 relate to extending those deadlines for Rygate. When you go into the specific sections of the bill, section 7 is that covered household hazardous products program. As Senator Watson noted, it was enacted last year. Much of the language that is in here is the language that you enacted last year, but you restructured it. You allowed the stewardship organization to ramp up first with the registration and then with and what they're calling an initial 3-year plan. So you will see that first initial registration for the stewardship organization on page 31, where on or before July 1, 2025, they have to register. But that's just an initial registration. They don't have to provide all the normal information that they would provide at an initial registration. You see on page 4, their subsequent registration beginning July 1, 2026 is, and annually thereafter, is when they provide the normal information that is provided by a GPR program, the list of manufacturers, the list of brands, the list of products that are covered under the program, and the description of how they're going to allow other people to enter into the program. So that's page 4 and 5. Then you come to section 9, which is the collection plan. Again, there's going to be an initial plan that's going to be for 3 years. You will see the components of that initial plan on page 5. You'll see a lot of struck language. That's because this is what's going to go into the subsequent full-fledged plan. The initial plan is, I won't say it's a truncated plan, but it's something that they know that they can implement in the first 3 years. Because as Senator Watson noted, this is a new program. They don't know the full universe of manufacturers and products that are going to be part of this program. They need time to ramp it up and figure out how they're going to manage and organize the program. So first 3 years, you still have the list of participants. You still have free statewide collection. They're still going to be providing on page 10 collection plan and funding, but all the education and convenience and all the normal components of any EPR collection plan is going to be moved to 3 years out. And that would begin on page 11, the subsequent plan. It begins basically 6 months after it's approved by ANR. It includes the list of participants, it includes free statewide collection. On page 11, 15 to 21, you'll see that will provide for the payment of collection processing and end-of-life management. And that will ultimately include payment of your solid waste management entities, your municipalities, for the costs that they incur in managing these products. Page 12, it has the convenience requirement. This is going to be a little bit different from the convenience requirement for other programs because of the nature of these products. They are potentially hazardous and have to be managed in a certain way. There's public education and outreach on page 12. There's page 13, lines 14 and line 20 about how to comply with the environmental standards and method of management, because these are potentially hazardous products. And again, this is all what was in the bill last year. You're just moving it 3 years out. Performance goal, same thing. There's going to be a performance goal dependent based on the number of people that are participating in the program divided by the number of households in the state, with the default performance goal of 7% to begin with, 7% of households to begin with. And then on page 15, you'll see another reference collection plan funding, and specifically on line 17 through 20. The plan shall include how municipalities will be compensated for all costs attributed to collection of covered household hazardous products. This is a very expensive program for municipalities right now, whether or not they're running events or they have a permanent collection facility. Management of these types of products is expensive. On page 16, you have section 10, which relates to the stewardship organization. This is really a little bit different from most EPR programs where you tell the stewardship organization that they're authorized to charge their own members reasonable fees for their organization, administration, and implementation. That's usually implied in the creation of these stewardship organizations, but because of the universe of products that are going to be covered in this program, the stewardship organization wants that specific statutory authority to charge its members for the cost attributed to each of its members. Now, with that said, Section 11 is new. It's not in the act from last year. It gives A&R the ability, if the stewardship organization cannot come up with an appropriate approved plan, A&R can issue its own plan and assess the cost to the manufacturers, plus what they are calling an additional hazardous waste reduction assessment of 10% of the plan's total cost. So it's an incentive for the manufacturers to come up with their own plan to avoid being charged a 10% additional cost assessment. Section 12 on page 18 is the landfill disposal. Because you're kind of moving out the implementation of this program, you have to move out the landfill disposal ban by year. And that's what page 18, line 14 does. Page 18, line 16, section 13. Because you're not implementing this program right away, the municipalities, the solid waste management entities still have their household hazardous waste collection requirements underneath the state solid waste plan, which is 2 events a year or 1 collection, just permanent collection facility. This gives A&R the ability to give them a variance. If they can show that they partnered with another municipality to allow residents access to a permanent facility, or they partnered with a nearby municipality to offer collection events in both municipalities, or they just demonstrate that they've made reasonable efforts and they were unable and that the cost of collection event is unreasonable. So this is just a little bit of flexibility between the initial implementation of the covered household hazardous products and the full implementation. Give those swimmies some room for these collection events. Page 19, you're moving into this paint stewardship program. I think Senator Watson explained it really great to avoid the confusion of whether or not some paint products are in covered household hazardous products and also in paint, or to have the paint stewardship program be a member of covered household hazardous products and running a paint EPR. You're clarifying what products are subject to the paint EPR program. Currently, it's architectural paint. That's not an intuitive term. It means basically the coatings for exterior and interior walls and surfaces. But then there are 3 new categories of paint products that are being added. And specifically in the definitions, you'll see that there's a definition on page 20, lines 12 to 15 of aerosol coating product. It's basically your aerosol paints that are dispensed through a disposable aerosol container. Then you'll see that definition of architectural paint. You should just look at that interior and exterior architectural coatings, what you would normally consider paint. And then, but on page 21, there's a definition of coating related product. It's a product used as an additive, a paint thinner, or colorant, the remover, the sealant, those types of products that are kind of combined with paint for the cleaning of paint products, or cleaning of walls, etc. They would become part of this program. And then on page 22, the non-industrial coating is kind of an umbrella of things like driveway steel, furniture oil, line paint, marine paint, wood preservatives, fire retardant paint, etc. Somehow chalkboard paint is different from other paint. I don't know why, but so you'll see an attempt to bring in as many products as possible. There will be some products, like somebody asked me, where's tongue oil? I'm like, I don't really know what tongue oil is. And
Counselor, I'm glad you said that.
and So A&R will have to make some determinations about what products are gonna be covered under this program. Because they just couldn't define the whole universe. But then you have a definition on page 22, line 14. What is going to be subject to the EPR program now? It's paint products, architectural paints, aerosol coating products, coating related products, and non-industrial coatings. Everything we just looked for. It's not health and beauty products. I don't know why we had to do that, but it's not. And so the rest of these changes, except for two changes, are conforming. It's changing architectural paint to paint product. Or changing the convenience requirements to, it's going to be focused on architectural paint because the convenience requirement for some of these products needs to be assessed because of the hazardous nature of some of these other products. So you're looking at a lot of changes from architectural paint to paint products. And that really goes through page 27. There is a change to the implementation date for the program because this doesn't get implemented until July of 20. I'm sorry. Doesn't get implemented until July of 26. And really not until 6 months after a collection plan is approved by A&R. Now, the big substantive change here is that the paint EPR, and it's on page 31, it's the only statutory EPR program that you have where the customer pays a fee at the time of sale of the product to pay for the cost of the EPR program. Right now, those costs that you pay when you buy paint are set through this process where the stewardship organization for the paint producers propose an assessment to A&R, and A&R approves that assessment, and then that assessment is imposed on the purchasers of paint. Well, that's not how you normally do fees in the legislature. In the legislature normally sets a fee whenever there is going to be a fee on citizens, especially when that fee is going to be used to run a state program. So on page 31, lines 11 to 21 and going on to page 32, that whole process, the current process of setting the assessment with the stewardship organization and A&R approval, that is struck. But then on page 36, you will see that the paint consumer fees are now going to be statutory. They start off with a statement that they are intended to be sufficient to implement and sustain the program. And if at any time they are not sufficient, the program shall propose new assessments. But then you see what the assessments are going to be for architectural paint. These are the assessments for architectural paint now. This is what if you went into a paint retailer or a hardware store right now, you would be paying for the various size products for paint. So that is not changing. It's just being put into statute instead of through that kind of unique way that it has been set. But when the fees were first proposed for the other products, the aerosol coatings, the non-industrial coatings, etc., the agency and the stewardship organization didn't have a great refined number. They had ranges. And the Ways and Means Committee did not like the ranges. They want the stewardship organization, and you'll see this on page 37, that the Secretary of Natural Resources, line 11 through 15, is going to report to you a recommended paint consumer fee or fees to be charged for paint products that are not architectural paint. So again, the traditional way that you do fees, the agency proposes to you a recommended fee, and you enact that in statute. And the fee report, recommendation comes in December 15, 2025. And remember, the program is not going to be implemented until July of 26. So you will have 6 months to set the fee and implement the program. So that's the paint program. I'm going to stop there to see if you have any questions about paint.
So certainly want to congratulate ourselves for finding yet another product that we can have control over. Sorry, my political stripe is showing through a bit. I'd be interested to know whether the paint industry itself is supportive of this. I understand the distinction, and the landscape as it is now is going to be different than it will be because we're only talking about architectural paint right now. And we've now expanded the UPR, and it's going to fall on the shoulders of, in the end, all of us, to be fair. The manufacturer will be borne, what cost right now, but I'm sure that'll be passed along at some point. So sorry I started that way, but it's just the way I feel.
The paint stewardship organization that runs the program has been involved in these changes. They support the changes because they don't want to be covered under 2 different programs. They don't want their products to be in covered household hazardous products and in the paint EPR. And I think you hit on an important point that these products will now be subject to a fee, just like architectural paint is for the cost of the program. And so that is something that wouldn't be authorized right now in covered household hazardous products. And so this is benefiting them in one way.
I have no further comment.
So the steward organization fails to submit the plan or submits a plan that does not meet the requirements of this chapter. And if I'm the stewardship believing I'm worried about subjectivity to this, that I believe I filled it out right, sent it to secretary, and they're not. How do we have quality control when it comes to that?
So that's for the covered household hazardous products plan. And the agency does have a lot of experience in working with manufacturers to get to a point where the plan meets both of the desires, the demands of the stewardship organization and the agency. And sometimes they have to come back to you to get some revisions to the program, the statutory program. The important parts are going to be the convenience and the collection plan payment. Those are really kind of what are focused on. The methods of disposition, federal law deals with that. How do you deal with the environmental standards? That's federal and state law. That's really kind of on the table already. They know what that is. Education. These companies already do education. They can come up with education materials that are going to be suitable. It's really about that convenience and that collection plan funding. Here you have a program that already exists where they do collection and they have costs, and part of the program encourages the stewardship organizations to use that existing system of collection. So it might be easier for this program to come up with collection plan funding because of the existing system of collection for these products. Now, convenience, I think, is probably going to be the hardest part of that program because you're dealing with products that you don't want necessarily to be returned to the local hardware store, because then the hardware store has to take on that responsibility of responsible management of the product. You create harm if it's not managed properly. So that's probably going to be the hardest part of that program. And I think they'll probably be able to get there. They'll probably go to something like they have done in other programs where there's 2 collection sites or not a certain number of collection events per county that provide for the collection of these types of products. I don't think it's as subjective as it sounds.
Okay. We haven't had much feedback from the paint companies in that, or the other products saying, hey,
the paint companies, they have their collection spots already. They have a system of collection. They work with the swimmies already. It's like they're
So, like Roundup, you have Roundup, you don't want to use anymore.
Roundup's a pesticide.
Is
That's
that a
the
whole other different?
That and our other bill that we
Alright,
had in
alright, I
here.
just don't want to get confused.
So
So,
we already, that's right, that's in our.
alright.
Yeah.
So the last part of this bill is the renewable power portfolio, which is a generic term for the project at Rygate. Alan is the expert on this. I don't know if do you want to take over?
Sure. Ellen Tchaikovsky, Office of Legislative Counsel. So quickly, there's a statute in Title 30 DSA 8009 that was adopted purely to describe the terms that apply to Rygate. Essentially, the state has a power purchase agreement with Rygate, meaning that all of the utilities, except for Burlington, are required to purchase the power generated by the Rygate biomass facility. So Rygate burns biomass to generate electricity. The utilities are required to purchase that electricity, and there's a rate that they're required to pay set by the Public Utility Commission. A few years ago, the legislature updated that statute to require Rygate to make updates to the facility to make it more efficient. If they do not comply with the deadlines set in the statute, then their power purchase agreement with the utility will terminate. And so there is a date coming up in the fall that if Rygate misses that deadline, their power purchase agreement would terminate. And so what this section does is extend every date in the timeline by 1 year to give Rygate time to make the updates. So it still keeps, there's still in statute an end to the current power purchase agreement in 2032. That date is not changing, but all the other dates in the statute are being bumped out 1 year.
And then, did they believe they could do it in 1 year, get all the upgrades?
This is the change of that Rygate requested.
Right.
So I'm in full support of this. A great history lesson earlier about maybe an owner that had some challenges. And then they have a new owner, there are jobs involved here, there are loggers involved here, so it's important that, to me, we keep this going, and I'd love to see it, give them another 2 years, but
Right.
whatever's in there.
And that's not what they're asking for. So
Yeah,
they're asking
that's
for
fine.
themselves for a year.
And I'll definitely support that.
Okay, anybody in the room that have anything that want to add anything? Anybody got anything to do?
I just want to introduce Alison Crowley from the paint coatings industry. Has been a part of the process regarding this whole process.
Right, and we appreciate all the time that Senate National, Allison Crowley representing the American Coatings Association under our umbrella. The Paint Care Program is the paint stewardship organization that's been up and operating in Vermont for 13 years. And so the bill, it really is rather simple in that we're as Councilor O'Grady and Madam Chair explained, we're really just expanding our existing scope of products to be collected under the existing stewardship organization to paint related products. So we fully support the bill.
Okay.
And thank everybody, including the swimmies, the solid waste districts also were at the table as we discussed this, and who was in full support, and I hope the committee will support as well. So thank you for that opportunity.
Thanks, Al.
Chair Watson, you good?
I'm good.
Everybody in the room's good?
Yep.
Committee, straw poll vote?
Yeah.
Everybody in favor?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I want to thank everyone.
We got a second amendment
Okay,
from
yeah.
Senate
Thank you.
Finance.
Okay, yeah.
Remember when your proposal of report had two tax sections in it? One was changing the use value appraisal eligibility for agricultural land to allow a person donating up to 2,000 in crops to qualify as opposed to selling those crops. Senate Finance accepted that proposal, but they moved the deadline for the implementation date for that to January of 26 to give PBR time to implement. The second tax section that you have related to deductions from your aggregate income in Vermont for net farm profit up to $10,000 or your net capital gain from the sale of farm if you were selling that to a family member or a long-term employee and the land remained in farming. The Senate Finance Committee, they didn't like the net capital gain provision because net capital gains generally are not deducted from Vermont income, and the GAFO also noted that they are also assessed at a different rate under your federal return. And they just didn't like both of those. The 10,000 wasn't accounted for in the budget. The net capital gains was you don't treat net capital gains for any other type of capital gains that way. And they were just uncomfortable with those provisions. And because they weren't accounted for in the budget, they would either have had to push out the effective date or somehow address them in the budget. And they just, I advocated for it. I just couldn't get them to there.
So this will be introduced as an amendment by Senate Finance.
Yes, it's already on.
And they're doing the handicap one as well.
Yes, and as part of their amendment, the Department of Forests and Parks came in with a very technical request for a change.
Okay.
So underneath the Administrative Procedure Act, let me go further back. Like before 2018, you couldn't find administrative rules, agency rules published in any predictable way. And to find them, you had to either know where to go or you had to know who to request from the agency. And so the General Assembly, as part of the Administrative Procedure Act, said that all agency rules needed to be published in the Code of Vermont Federal Regulations by the Secretary of State by 2018. Well, the Department of Forests and Parks did not know about that requirement. And they had on their books what's called the emergency heavy cut rule, which in statute, the General Assembly in statute said could continue on as a permanent rule until such time as it was amended by the Department of Forests and Parks. So they were under the understanding that that rule was just permanent until they amended it. And they didn't publish the rule by 2018. And then it came to their knowledge that there's an argument that their rule was repealed. They have not taken any enforcement actions under the rule. They are not engaged in any current enforcement actions. They don't believe that there's any due process issue, any enforcement action that they have has been brought under the statute and not the rule. So what they're looking for is a technical amendment to retroactively reinstate the emergency rule as if it was published in 2018 and was not repealed. And you will see that language in the Senate Finance Amendment the new section 6. And that's basically what it does.
So for the new senators, and even us old senators, that's just something they're gonna report on. We're not gonna get asked questions about it. I mean, the only thing that we'll get up and say, I'll say is that, I'll ask everybody good with that?
Yes.
Everybody, yep. Okay, so I'll just say that we looked at it as a committee and that we supported the amendment.
Yep.
And then if any questions, it will go on as part of that. So, other than that, thank you, Council.
Thanks, Mike.
As always, appreciate you very much. Appreciate all of you guys too on short notice, and we'll get this reported out. And, on that, we're getting close.